Yeah, so it went up. That's good, at least. But well, okay, so it's back. Okay, so just brief. What is this course about? Stop jumping, please. What is this course about? Well, many of you are becoming developers, software developers, and one important part of being a software developer right now is being able to use the web or program for the web, or use components that are common in web development, like HTTP, WebSockets, and other kind of technologies. Even if you're not supposed to be a web developer, you will need to know those technologies. Even if you're working with embedded systems in an IoT thing, you will probably need to connect that thing to the internet, and hence you will need to know basics of web development. You will not, this is not a web design course. We will not be designers that make beautiful web pages. This course is aimed for developers and what developers need to know to be productive as a developer. So I just want that disclaimer that I'm not a graphical artist or something like that. So the goal is not to make things beautiful. If you can do that, please go ahead, but that's not the goal of the course. And I will start off today by introducing HTML before the lunch, and after the lunch we will have a look at CSS. And I will do that in my way. I've been teaching HTML and CSS for, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. I started out by using HTML in the 90s. The last 5 years I haven't been a part of HTML and CSS development more than as a developer. I haven't taught a lot of HTML and CSS the last couple of years because we have another department taking care of that. So I'm kind of focusing on JavaScript and developing web applications. But we will change to the presentation. It's before we start, I would just like to add to, since I'm in Kalmar, we are trying out new ways of doing this kind of education. We have been doing distance education since 2002, and we have built a studio in Kalmar where we can record things in quite a pretty way. So we are evolving our education to not be only lectures. We have a lot of recorded demos and things like that, and I will build upon that in this course as well. So maybe I will say that, okay, next Wednesday we will have no lecture. We have a tutoring past the whole day, and I will record demos for you guys. But you will know that in Slack, and I will change the schedule if that happens. How many of you are taking the next course, the 1DV523, which is kind of not logical, but yeah. Server-based web programming. Yeah. So this is the first course, and then we have a course called server-based web programming, and then they stem from the web developer program that we have in Kalmar. However, this is a compressed version of the first two courses, or maybe 3 first courses in that program. The 523, on the other hand, is the same course that we have in Kalmar. And in this course, we will focus on the client side, the web browser, and in the next course, we will focus a lot on the server. So as I said, all our materials is free to use. So please go ahead and spread the material. Only comply to this license, the CC BY. More or less, you need to reference where it came from. So the content for today. I will talk a little bit about or introduce the web as a platform. We will look at protocols. We will have a brief discussion of how HTML became what it is today. And we will start by creating our first HTML document, look at the structure, things like that. Kind of building our first web page. So this image is one that I show on more or less every introduction, because this is like an important part of web development. It's really simple, but it's essential to have in mind when you build web applications. So this is a simple client-server model. You have probably seen it before. You've probably worked with servers or client-server communication. But this is what the web is built upon. So we have a client on this side, the client being the web browser in normal circumstances. However, with a changing or evolving technology, we tend to move against other types of clients, not just browsers. If you, for instance, if you install Slack or the development environment, Visual Studio Code, that we're using in this course, they are actually web applications. They are just disguised as normal applications, computer applications, but they are web applications. If you look at apps for mobile phones or smartphones, many of them are web applications just disguised as a normal application. So, but that is the client. That is what the user is experience. However, when we move to the next course, the client might be another server. But that is for the next course. In this course, the client is the web browser or the application running. The server, on the other hand, is somewhere else. Might be your local computer that acts as a server, or as in this case, we are using GitHub as the server for our web pages. The model is really simple. The client makes a request to the server, and the server responds with a response. So request and response. And when you load a web page, this is not like only happening once. This is like happening all the time. So if you visit a normal web page, you have a request to get the first HTML page back to the browser, and then in that HTML page you will find images, and those images are fetched in the same manner. CSS files, JavaScript files, or even other content as well that needs to be added, like a chat or something like that. Yeah.
Why did you choose GitHub?
Why did I choose GitHub instead of, for instance, Bitbucket? We did. That was just a policy. We said, okay, we'll go with GitHub because it's quite simple to work with for us. And you will all get free repositories or private repositories on GitHub as part of the course. Those repositories, if you follow the Getting Started guide, there is instructions how to get started with GitHub. Those repositories will be we will start generating them tomorrow. So if you get to the step where you need to go into our organization on GitHub, you have to pause until I tell you in Slack more or less that we are starting generating those repositories. But I mean, if you are going to like develop a web page and have it on a server, GitHub is actually quite an easy way to start because it's free and you can like have simple web pages on GitHub for free. However, if you do this as more as a business, you will probably move on to other solutions like Amazon or something like that. But it's working with Amazon is a little bit cumbersome with the student accounts. We are getting there, but not yet. Okay, so have this model in mind. So I will actually give you some tips on questions for the oral exam. This is a typical question for the oral exam. So what is the client in this environment? And you are supposed to say like a browser or something like that. What is a request? What is a response? That kind of questions is what we will ask on the oral hearing. A common misunderstanding, you will hear it on the news and you will read about it, but people tend to mix up internet and the web. But those are two completely different things. The internet stems from ARPANET back in the 60s, has been around for a really long time. The web was developed in the 90s, early 90s, late 89 or late 80s. Anyone know who came up with the web? Yeah, it's from CERN in Switzerland. You remember the name of the guy who did it? No, it's Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He's the one that kind of acknowledged that before the web, like all documents were stored on mainframe computers, and you had to like book a time on that computer to access the material on the computer or the server. However, he thought of a model that would be more distributed among researchers, that you could have your own document on your computer and you could just share links to other researchers, and your documents could be referenced in this network over the internet. So he came up with this in the late 80s, beginning of the 1990s. And one thing that he did that was genius was instead of taking like royalty fees or things like that, he just released it for free. And that's basically one of the reasons why the web became as popular as it did, because everybody could use it for free. We will not have a lot of discussions about the history, but I think it's important to know that the web is an application that is running upon internet. I mean, you have a lot of applications like mail or torrent or whatever on the internet, but the web is only one application. It's pretty hard to define what is the web. If we go back a couple of years, it was quite easy. You could say, okay, the web is using a protocol called HTTP to deliver HTML and CSS to the user and have the ability to link between documents. That was pretty much the web. However, with recent change in technology, you cannot say that a web page only uses HTTP, because we have a lot of other protocols today. However, still, a foundation for the web is HTTP, the protocol HTTP. And you have probably read a lot about some protocols. You might recognize TCP/IP, especially if you are into network security, I guess. You know your TCP/IP model by heart, or more or less, or the OSI model. I used to do that. I don't anymore, because for me, I don't need to think about like the infrastructure. I can focus on the application upon the infrastructure. So upon TCP/IP, we have the application layer. And in this application layer, we have the protocol HTTP. This protocol is released in two versions. 1.1, that is like, or well, there was a 1.0 before, but we talk about 1.1 and 2. The 1.1 is the classical HTTP version that is very commonly used. However, it has some flaws. It was really good at just delivering one web page with a couple of images. However, that is not how the web looks today. The web today is more dynamic. You load a web page and a lot of things changes. If you look at Facebook, for instance, you get like real-time news feeds and messages popping up and things like that. And HTTP 1.1 is not optimized for that. So a new version was released, to version 2. So if you look at like Google or Facebook or those larger applications, they are usually running on HTTP 2. They are compatible. So I mean, if you write an HTML page like we do in this course, you can deliver it over HTTP 1 or 2. Doesn't matter. But there are some differences in the protocol that we as developers need to be aware of, because it affects how we deliver or think when we structure our HTML pages. So for instance, just as an example, in HTTP 2, it's not a bad thing to have a lot of files delivered to the browser, a lot of small files, because we have something called HTTP streams in HTTP 2. So it could actually be an advantage to have a lot of small files. However, if you do that in HTTP 1, the browser will probably start getting slow, because the overhead for each and every file in HTTP 1 is really big. So in HTTP 1, it's a good thing to compact as many files into one giant file as possible. However, in HTTP 2, that's an anti-pattern. So I will kind of mention those things where it's needed, but just be aware that there is a difference between those two protocols. For you taking the server-based web programming course, we will get into more details about this, because it's important when we get to the server side. Upon HTTP, we have another layer, the TLS SSL layer, the secure socket layer. And this is basically to have an encrypted connection between the client and the server. This is getting really important today. If we go back just like 6 years ago, the common pattern was don't encrypt everything, only encrypt things that are essential, like login pages and things like that. That today, you are supposed to encrypt all communication. This had a server cost. It was quite costly for the server to encrypt and for the client to decrypt messages all the time. But that was 6 years ago. Today, that is not seen as a problem. So if you are developing web pages and only focus on HTTP, for instance, Google will punish you in the search results. They will favor HTTP sites over non-secure sites. And in not a too distant future, you will, as a user, start getting warnings if you are visiting HTTP sites. And if we look ahead, you will probably, the browser will probably just ban HTTP sites, but that's a bit in the future. Yeah.
The guys on Slack are saying that they have no picture, just voice.
I can only hear your voice.
Is it black?
Yeah, it's black.
My God, that has happened a couple of times.
I think you're mixing both. Like you can see your elbow there.
Yeah, but if it's black, it's another problem. But it will still be black if I do that. And that is a problem. Oh my God. So we will have to bear to the break, and I will have to reset in the break. But that is not supposed to happen like that. That's not a good sign at all. Is it working?
Yeah.
But not now. Oh well, there's a delay in the stream. Let's some error.
Not now.
Okay. So if I change to this one, let's see. Is it back? It's black as soon as I show the screen then. Is it working now? Okay, so it's the mixed view that's not working. Okay, good to know, thank you. Then I will stay on this one. you can't see that, but that's how it looks now. Okay, as I said before, it was easy if we no. Yeah. Okay. So it was easy before. We had only the HTTP protocol. However, today we have a lot of other protocols, and one important one is the WebSocket protocol. So HTTP is kind of used to just send a request and get a response back, and it's quite slow. However, WebSocket is more like for you to be able to stream real-time data to the browser. So if you are writing a chat or a stock application or a game or anything that needs real-time data to the browser, WebSocket is the way to go. We will look at WebSockets in this course, and you will use that for the last assignment in the course. But it's a really neat protocol. It's quite new, or well, it's 5 years old or something like that. But it's really easy to work with. You will be surprised. Okay. Let's have a brief history lesson before we take a break. So this is the web in 1993. So Tim Berners-Lee has just released the first version in Switzerland, CERN. This is actually the first web page. It looked like this. If you look at this, you're kind of familiar what this is, right? There is no. I mean, you know that this blue text is links. So we know that that's kind of a header, something like that. It's quite familiar. This was like the dream for Tim Berners-Lee, to be able to structure data in a semantic way with nice links and things like that. However, I mean, it's an open standard, and other players got involved, like Microsoft and later on Mozilla, and they saw a benefit of adding things for normal users, not just researchers, like images and like beautiful text and changing colors, things like that. When I got into web development, this was kind of what you did. It was quite boring. You had like this lists of things that I like, and you could have some links to other web pages. There weren't that many actually, so you could probably link to quite a few of them. But this was in '94, and then all Microsoft and all the other web browser developers got into the picture and tried to make web pages more accessible for the public. And if we go to 1996, you might recognize this kind of. Anyone surfed the web in '96? Recognize this? This was like pages looked like this for quite a few years. This wasn't what Tim Berners-Lee had in mind when he designed the web. Like GIFs and just like making awful backgrounds that you cannot read the text. But this was like, back then the browser manufacturers, they competed in getting the developers' attention. And they did that by adding a lot of cool stuff to the browser, like blinking text. Oh, I need blinking text. Then I will not use Internet Explorer. Oh, well, I will not use Mosaic any longer because I would like to use Internet Explorer because they have blinking text. And all the developers start to develop for Microsoft Internet Explorer. And then the other ones like added some other stuff, and the developers shifted. This was called the browser wars. Actually, the first browser war, there was a second one. But a couple of years later, companies got into the picture and wanted to like present the company and use this for business, and the web pages started to look more organized. As the developer, you focused on getting content to the user. And something called frames emerged, that you were able to, in an easy way, divide the page into different parts. So when you were supposed to have like a menu like this, you didn't need to change more than the frame in the middle of the page. However, it had its difficulties. You probably remember like menus stretching over the frames, so that you need to like mark with the mouse pointer and drag the menu to get it up. If you searched on this page, you could get to like only the headline without seeing anything else. But frames were actually used starting at the late 90s, just until like 10 years ago, something like that. But today I would argue that no one that is serious is using frames for anything. Might be using an iframe still for integrating a video or something like that, but frames is not used in web development anymore. I've actually been arguing with students that absolutely wanted to use frames in my courses, and the only one that had a valid point up till now is a developer that released documentation on a CD to go with their product, so that the user could easily open that locally without having a server involved or any scripting. That was kind of a good case for using frames, but other than that, not if you release a site on the internet. You should not use frames. We will not use frames in this course. I will say nothing more about frames, more than they are really bad for they are bad for search engines. They are bad for people with disabilities. For instance, if you're blind and you need a screen reader, those are horrible. So please do not use frames. Well, going back to 2003, everything changed again, and looks like I've forgot something on this picture, because it looks exactly like it did in 1993. You can say that, okay, so developers of browsers actually caught up with Tim Berners-Lee's ideas of what the web was supposed to be, or what HTML is supposed to be. And it's supposed to be like this. Really, really simple listing of information with this bullet lists back, with links, with paragraphs, with headlines. Really, really simple. And I would argue that every web page you look at today will look kind of like this. Even if you take Slack, for instance, if you look under the hood, it's more or less just organized like this. But of course, something is missing. This is only the HTML. We have no styling applied. But by adding styles to this page, we can change it in so many, many ways. We could make it look exactly like we want to. However, this is the view that search engines will see. This is the view that persons with disabilities will see. So this view is actually the most important view, or one of the most important views. This tells a lot to search engines. For instance, it tells the search engine that this is a header. And by that, the search engine will know, okay, this is probably quite important. This is probably what the page is about. It will tell the search engine that this is a paragraph of text under this headline. It will tell the browser that saker jag tycker om is yet another headline. It will tell the browser that this is some kind of